Welcome to the Big Pod Machine, the best baseball podcast in all of... What, Pat?
Number one, numero uno. That's us.
Number one, yes. Thank you. That's my colleague, Pat Brennan. I'm Gordon Wittenmyer with our producer, Phil Didion. Yes, number one in the city. Is that right? We're the best. We're just simply the best. This is the best Reds podcast anywhere ever. And we've got the best information here. In fact, Pat, you can start us off with the latest news as we opened the homestand against the Cardinals back in the division here. There was some personnel news, one kind of big one in terms of Terry Francona already making some decisions on some playing time issues.
Yeah, James, the big one coming out of Terry's office before Monday's game, Gordon, was Jeimer Candelario is on the bench for the time being.
$45 million sitting on the bench. That's a lot for the Cincinnati Reds, isn't it?
And like you wrote, it's a lot for any small market team, I think, or medium market team, whatever class you want to put the Reds in. It's a ton of money. And as you wrote over the weekend, they are basically almost 2 full years still to go on this deal. So you've got a lot of time left on this contract, but you've already spent a considerable amount of time waiting for Jeimer to come around. He hasn't, and Terry Francona has legitimate options elsewhere at the corner infield positions where he can get production, and they're getting good production out of Noelvi Marte and Spencer Steer. Well, less so Spencer Steer, but he at least is showing signs of life, especially now that he's more of a complete player, able to play on the defensive side. Gordon, what was your reaction when you saw this come down yesterday?
Well, we can get back to some of the other news that came out too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I know that, so you and I kind of tag team things a little bit here. And so I was on that last road trip for the 3 cities, and then you picked it up for the Cardinals series. Coming out of, what's all jumbled to me, Denver, which is where they finished the road trip with that sweep. Candelario not only didn't play the first 2 games of that series, he wouldn't have played the third game of that series if not for what looked like a good pitching matchup until the Rockies changed their pitcher.
And they are publishing my book. And there's a party.
What do you got going there, Pat? We got a guest? We got a... Turn off your phone, man. You're on a podcast.
My bad.
We got the TV on.
Unbelievable.
You're like that guy that calls in the radio station and has his radio on.
I know that keeps the radio on.
No, it's all good, man. So so Candelario's been in the playing time doghouse for quite a while, and his bat's been chewed up by the dog for quite a while because the guy got 3 hits in his first 4 bats, and I think he's got 6 since. And so he's by far the worst player on the team right now. And so there were indications that this was coming on Sunday, the way Terry talked about him. And then we saw he just basically said it. Look, he's going to be on a bench basically until further notice. And big part of that is Noelvi Marte, who we can talk about a little later. Noelvi Marte has really kicked it in the ass since opening in the minors and getting a call up because of injuries. And then Spencer Steer, to your point, he's hitting over 300 since he's been back in the field. He was miserable as the DH, but since he's been back in the field, he's really done a good job. So you talk about production at the corners. They got almost none. They got the worst in baseball at the corner infield spots last year in terms of just overall productions. And this year, right now, if you just look at what Noelvi Marte's done and what Spencer Steer's done since he's been in the field, they're right back up there again. They're getting the kind of production you need from those spots. And so why would you play Jeimer Candelario, who's also has never lit the world on fire with his glove? So this is where you're at. My reaction to it, you asked me my reaction, other than kind of seeing it coming, I give Terry Francona a lot of credit in this regard. Is it genius that he identified that he needs to bench Candelario? Of course not. And that he did it? Of course not. But a lot of times, especially a new manager coming in, the rough timeline for making major changes, even something like this, is, the quarter pole. Roughly, you get 6 weeks into it. He didn't wait. He didn't wait till the end of April. He saw enough. He knows what he's looking at. He also knows what's at stake here. And they're trying to win. And winning a few games at the end of April and early May matter, as opposed to waiting. If you know what you're seeing. It's the same. It's the same in spring training when he identified Alexis Diaz was not going to be his closer. Yeah. I know the way he talked about it all the way through, but he knew in spring training Alexis Diaz wasn't going to be his closer unless Alexis Diaz came out with a fire lit under his ass, which he didn't. And if anything, it's looked like the opposite. So these are things that very early on, these are the kind of differences that bringing in a new manager like Terry Francona with the credentials that he has, these are differences that it makes, right? Yeah. And this is what you were trying to achieve when you made that manager change. And so I do give him a lot of credit for that. I don't know if it's going to wind up winning the division, but these are the right moves to make. Yeah, obviously. Gordon's making them.
So well said. Nothing to add to that on the Jeimer Candelario point. I did want to mention the other news item to come out of Terry's office yesterday was that on the pitching front, the Reds avoided an injury scare after Wade Miley was pulled from his rehab start at High A Dayton in the first inning. That is always alarming. It turns out Wade, it sounds like he's going to be okay. The issue was a groin. He had an MRI, came back clean, and he might be back on a mound as soon as this weekend, Terry said. So the Reds avoid an injury scare there, which is good for the pitching depth.
What was the issue? Just an old guy that his ligaments got creaky on him or something? I mean, if the MRI came back clean, what was the problem? I mean, this guy's pitched through all kinds of things in his life. It must have been just whatever, an old man tweak or something.
Well, hey, listen, I don't have a problem with Wade Miley calling his own number there because he does know his own body. And I think, as we were talking about before we started recording here, it's not, Wade Miley's presence on the team this year isn't insignificant. And do you kind of want to talk about why that is?
Well, I mean, the reason is, look, when you signed him, you thought you had Rhett Lauder firmly in the mix for a top 5 spot. You had your swingman Nick Martinez back making $20 million a year, so you thought he was in. You had traded for Brady Singer. You had Lodolo and Abbott and Hunter Green. So you came in thinking, who's going to be the odd man out among the top 6? Plus you had Carson Spires in the wings. Yeah. And then you had Wade Miley, who was going to be back, and you figured if Wade Miley's healthy, he's part of the mix. So how does he fit in late May, which is what you thought then? Now it's looking more like, well, it was looking more like early June. So that I guess what I'm saying is that when you first signed him, it was a sort of a roll of the dice. It was depth. Everybody needs depth. You need 15, 16 starters by the end of the season in some form or another. So having a guy like this who, if he's healthy, has a track record and you can win some games with him and get some innings out of him, big deal. That's a big deal. He wasn't expected to be the man. I mean, that's Hunter Green, right? Yeah. Nick Lodolo on some days. So that wasn't that. But this is right now, it's especially a big deal because Carson Spires went on the IL, and he's going to be out until after the All-Star break. And Rhett Lauder, got slowed down in spring training. and so they built him up really slowly. He won't be ready until probably the first week of June or so. So unless you're going to go to Chase Petty, who on any given start looks like he might be close to ready for a debut or maybe not, either way, that's a roll of the dice. You don't have any pitching depth beyond your top 5 right now. The 5 guys in the rotation right now are it for more than a month, the way it looks right now, assuming that Rhett Lauder doesn't have a setback. So when you lose another guy that was going to be due right in that frame, and now he gets pushed back in all likelihood, then that's where it becomes a big deal, because you have zero depth right now that's not an untested minor league guy, and so your fingers are crossed as tight as they've been crossed since the season began. That's where that, in my mind, that's the loss of Wade Miley. Although, as you say, he might be right back out there, right?
Yeah. That is what Terry Francona says. As things stand, Gordon, it's April 29th. The Reds are 3 games over 500. Is this about, what do you think? We're almost a full month. We are a full month into this thing. How are you feeling about where the Reds are at today?
Well, you and I have talked a lot on the podcast, off the podcast, about what their strengths and weaknesses are. I would say, just to get, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we just pick 4 areas and give a quick grade on it?
Sure.
Starting pitching, I think I'd give him an A for starting pitching.
Yep.
Bullpen, I'd give him I don't know, let's call it a C plus. The fielding, which is something that was an F last year, I'd give him a nice solid C. Maybe a C, maybe a C minus, but I'd call it a C. And then hitting, it's still a D. I mean, it probably thought D coming in, maybe a D plus, C minus. And so that's probably on balance, roughly what we thought would be their strengths and weaknesses, in my mind, and maybe a little better. What do you think?
Oh, fielding, recency bias playing a factor in my opinion here. I got to witness another game last night where the glove work behind the pitching was really solid. They turned 3 double plays. TJ Friedel had a sliding catch. Jose Trevino and Noel V. Marte heads up play in the 5th inning to get a force out at third base off a bunt. That really cut down a would-be Cardinals rally. And yet, so I think most people have the impression that the Reds are a better fielding team. I think that's true. And yet they're still a bottom 10 team in MLB in terms of fielding percentage. And yet people continue to talk about the difference year over year, and how much this team has improved from last year. Scary to think how bad it was last year, because it seems like it's night and day this year. What were the categories? We had starting pitching,
bullpen.
Certainly. Bullpen, I'm going to go B minus, because I like what Emilio Pagan is giving you as the go-to closer right now. We're basically in the same area there. Fielding, I think I can say C minus again. And hitting, I'm with you, D.
Yeah, inconsistent. What is starting pitching? We both think that's an A?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So they're delivering where we thought they would, starting pitching. And the bullpen, we thought was a big question mark coming in. It's held its own.
Yeah, for now.
And Pagan's been a big part of that for now. And, and you got to have faith. I mean, the manager gets an A, right? And that's part of the bullpen. That's a big part of the bullpen. So,
yeah.
So I like where they sit right now in terms of their ability to be competitive going forward. As we record this on Tuesday before Tuesday night's game, they've got a win in the bank against the Cardinals, and they're 1 game back of the Cubs. Now, if we want to talk about where we think they are in relation to the division, being competitive for a playoff spot.
Let's go there.
I think we have to talk about the Cubs.
Yeah, we do.
Well, why don't you give? I'm going to give a stat, and then I want your impression of the Cubs, the Reds, and the race for the next 5 months.
Sure.
I tweeted this out last night. Brooksgate, a Twitter, a really cool Twitter account. It does a lot of baseball statistics. It listed the number of games every team in baseball has played against a losing team, like a current losing team. And the Cubs were the only ones on that list that had yet to play a team that currently had a losing record. And the Reds were tied with the Red Sox for the fourth most of those games at 17. Now, the other part of that Cubs statistic is that I saw another site that broke it down, and this is based on what we think we know about the teams now in all of baseball and how they performed so far. Based on that, the Cubs just finished off the strongest month of baseball, start to finish, that any team will play on its schedule this year. The toughest month, start to finish, that, and I don't mean like calendar month, I mean a 4+ week period.
Yeah.
That any team will play all year. They played all their Padres, Dodgers, and Diamondbacks games. They got a series against the Phillies that they played. They played the Rangers in that stretch. We know the Reds have too. I can't remember. That might be most of them right there. So, and they were 17-12, and in first place by a game over the Reds. So they've got by the same measure, they've got the easiest schedule in baseball the rest of the way. So that said, I want to hear your thoughts on where you think this division is headed and the Reds' place in it.
Yeah. My initial reaction to all of that is it's very impressive by the Cubs, and the Reds should take notice. Because as you and I have discussed, and I want to give you full credit for some of the ideas and concepts I'm going to put back in the conversation here, because a lot of this is derived from your analysis. This is this soft portion of the Reds' schedule. And I think in terms of putting yourself in a position to contend later in the season, you need to be making hay right now. I don't know. 16-13 is a nice place to be. They could be better off. And I don't know if the Reds have done enough with this soft portion of their schedule. And they're not done with it. I think you and I agree that the schedule really picks up at the end of May with the series starting at Chicago, at Wrigley Field. And then, so you've got about a month here, if you're the Reds, where you're playing games that you feel pretty good about on paper.
Even the next road trip, which is to Atlanta and Houston, Atlanta hasn't put together a real strong stretch yet.
Yeah.
And Houston isn't what Houston's been in recent years.
Yeah, totally agree. So I think if you're the Cubs, you obviously feel great about the position you're in. And if this is what you did, I think the thinking probably, if you're a Cubs fan, is look at what we've done with the hardest schedule in baseball. If it's going to get easier from here, in theory, this looks like it plays out really well for the Chicago Cubs. The Reds are going to have to level up if they want to keep pace with that. I think that's clear.
Yeah. To your point, now that they've played the Cardinals, they've seen everybody in the division except the Cubs.
Yeah.
So it puts a premium on all those games against the Cubs.
Yeah.
And they'll see them at home for the first time this season on May 23rd. And to your point about where the schedule kicks in, they got the Cubs, a good Kansas City team on the road, then the Cubs on the road. So that's a stretch of 9 games right there. Then they come back home and face the Brewers, their white whale, and the Diamondbacks with the bolstered Diamondbacks come to town. So that's a tough a tough homestand, and then they go right out of there to Cleveland, which is playing well again, and Detroit, which some people are already calling the best team in the American League. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 consecutive series over what a 3-week span there, a 3.5-week span, and, where it gets really tough.
In this relatively new era of quote unquote balanced schedules where everyone plays everyone, I don't think it's totally
balanced.
Yeah. You're facing the same teams, but I think as you kind of laid out with the density of quality teams the Cubs have played so far, it's just a really dense mix of quality opponents for the Reds, rather, from basically late May through the meat of the summer, all the way through the dog days. I think this is shaping up to be. The Reds look so interesting right now. They are fun and entertaining at times, and you saw them be real. They went 6-3 on the 9-game road trip that you just covered, Gordon. They
didn't look good in Miami.
No, they didn't.
And they took advantage of the team that might be the worst in baseball in Colorado.
Their
record is the worst in baseball.
I mean, that brings me to an interesting thought that I saw floating around the Twitter sphere here in Cincinnati while you were out in Denver, Gordon, which was, do you give the Reds full credit for sweeping the Rockies, or is that kind of the bare minimum expectation, kind of the bar to clear? And unfortunately, I think it's what you have to do against the Rockies. If this Reds team is I always think it's unfair to expect or demand one MLB team to go in and sweep any other, because the other guys are getting paid to play too, right? But
that team was horseshit.
Well, okay, fair enough. You're right.
And they better sweep the White Sox when they play them.
You have to. This Reds
if you're
team
a playoff team,
yeah.
If you're a playoff team, because you got to get the wins where they're available to you when you don't have a complete team, and the Reds don't have a complete team. But that said, what I will say is that debate about Colorado, do you give them full credit for the sweep, or do you have to expect that? The fact that it was in Colorado, Coors Field comes with a built-in shit show. So a lot of times. I mean, I've seen the craziest ass games there.
Absolutely.
I saw 10 runs scored in an inning once.
Absolutely.
You take that into account, and that game Friday was in bad conditions too. So it could have gone either way for no good reason.
Stupid, silly things happen at Coors Field.
So they wound up. They got through a sloppy game, and I don't mean sloppy like the way the teams played. I just mean sloppy conditions, tough conditions. They got through that and won it. I think if it wasn't a 1-run game, it was a 2-run game, but it was close at the end. And then they won a close game just because they were the better team on Saturday, and then they smoked them on Sunday. So I give them credit. I give them credit for that, just because of the Coors Field factor. And they were coming off a rough series against the Marlins. I want to add something to this idea of the schedule, and the idea of, I think it's fair to say the Cubs have proven it's going to be a tough uphill climb to get to the playoffs for anybody else in that division.
Yeah.
And especially the way the Cubs hit. I don't think that's an aberration. I think Kyle Tucker's addition to that lineup legitimately lengthened it to the degree that we're seeing now. I think that's real. Those were some good pitching staffs. They put up some big numbers on. They're if they're not the best hitting team in baseball right now, they're right near the top.
Yeah.
So if I'm a Reds fan or even a Brewers fan, what I'm taking some hope in, optimism in. The Cubs lost their best starter for the season, Justin Steele. They already didn't have even the Reds level of starting pitching depth. They've got a young kid, Ben Brown, who looked terrible in his last start, who's their fourth starter. They got Colin Ray as their fifth starter. They'd have to go to the minors or a bullpen day for a sixth starter at this point. They got a nice kid down there in their system who they're looking for an excuse to call up at some point, but he walks a bunch of guys. And their bullpen has a 4.99 ERA as they entered the week. They've had bullpen issues for the last 2 years, and they thought they had them fixed, and they've still got some stuff to figure out there. Pitching wins or loses in baseball long term. We know that. Until they go out and trade for somebody like Sandy Alcantara, which, if it happens at all, will be a month or two from now.
Yeah.
At best, right? Then if I'm playing against them, I feel pretty sure they're going to have a stretch at some point where they're not playing as well, no matter what their schedule looks like. And here's the thing about the Reds. Terry Francona is the manager. What good managers tend to do when they have good teams, and we've already seen some signs about it, right? Because we talked about Diaz and we talked about Candelario. What they tend to do is their teams tend to get better, especially if they're young teams. They tend to get better through the year because they manage, like early in the season, they manage out the kinks, like whether it's the Candelario or the closer situation. And then as they get toward the second half, they start to hit the accelerator a little harder. And you'll see, I guarantee you, what you'll see in July, if this team's in it, there will come a game at some point in July, probably after the All-Star break, when Francona pulls a starter in a close game in the fourth or fifth inning with a low pitch count, and you're saying, what the hell? And it's going to be because he's managing that game like he would in the playoffs because he's trying to get a win. And that's when you're going to know that they're in pennant race mode. And that's what the best managers in the game do. He's not going to manage that way now. He's going to manage the roster now. He's going to see what he's got. He's going to try to win every day, but he's going to manage out the kinks. Yeah. Second half, you might see an accelerator. So it's no guarantee that they get to the playoffs or that they even get better. But they have the kind of manager now that where they're going to have a chance in the second half with the same personnel to get better. And so if I'm the Cincinnati Reds, if I'm buying a ticket to Cincinnati Reds games because I'm a fan, that's one of the reasons I'm buying a ticket maybe in August.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the old baseball adage, you can't win a pennant, you can't win a World Series in April, but you can certainly lose it. The Reds, if you think about the game that way, and I do, the Reds have done the job in April. Wouldn't you agree?
I concur with that, and they did it with a few points of adversity. They had a lot of good. They had a lot of good fortune with health, and they gave away a few games.
They did,
but they're going to wind up finish in April. What's the date today, my man? 29th. So we got 2 games left. They're going to finish with a winning record.
Yeah.
And that's a good position to be in. Could it be better? Sure, you could be the Cubs. You could be in the Cubs position right now, but they're only a game back of the Cubs as we sit here talking. Yeah. So I think you'll take that. I think you'll take that going into May.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm covering the team, and I'll take it.
All right, man. Well, I think that's probably a wrap. I think we've done all the damage we can do this week talking about the ball club. But hey, good stuff, man. And read Pat Brennan's stuff during the Cardinal series this week because it'll be worth it. You'll learn a lot. And until next week, that's it for the Big Pod Machine. Again, the greatest Cincinnati Reds podcast in all of the baseball universe. For Pat Brennan and our producer, Phil Didion, it's Gordon Wittenmyer, and we'll see you next week.